Israel says it's bombed more than a dozen Hezbollah targets in Beirut on Thursday, even as G7 nations urged against an uncontrolled cycle of escalation in the Middle East. The Associated Press says Israeli forces also warned people to evacuate more communities in southern Lebanon, a signal it may widen its ground operation. Meanwhile, the region is bracing for Israel's response to Iran's missile barrage earlier this week. President Biden fueled a bit of uncertainty on Thursday when asked if the U.S. would support attacks on Iranian oil facilities to support Israel striking Iran's oil facilities. "Sir, we're in discussion. I think that would be a little." Anyway, for more, let's bring in Bloomberg's UE bureau chief, Donna Khraiche, and also Bloomberg's Dan Williams, who is in Jerusalem for us. So, Donna, let's just start with you. I mean, what did you make of those comments from President Biden yesterday? A lot of reaction in the market in particular. Morning. Yes, we saw oil surging yesterday on these comments by President Joe Biden and about what would come next, what we are expecting from Israel. And the question was really straightforward: would the U.S. support an attack on oil facilities there? And he said we are discussing that. That alone is very concerning, and this is suggesting that the targeting any energy and infrastructure is actually on the table. And that's what the US probably and Israel are talking about. He did the day before say no to any attack on nuclear facilities. So it remains to be seen, and this is going to cause a lot more uncertainty until Israel strikes. And this is why this may cause or stir Iran into a heavier response yet again on Israel. It could target oil tankers in the sea. It could also, and that's probably the worst case scenario, close down a very vital waterway, which is the Strait of Hormuz, and that could also send oil prices even higher and fuel more uncertainty about the spiraling conflict in the Middle East. Right, and really where it goes next. Dan, can you jump in here? Because Dana was just saying the targeting is perhaps on the table, but the timing is unclear, and that's really seeming where the jitters are coming from. There appears to be a delay in the response. I mean, any thoughts on why that might be? Good morning. Well, it's Donna noted the very least that we can take away from those comments by President Biden is that the US and Israel are discussing this. So we know there is a degree of US collaboration here, US assistance, presumably a degree of US constraints on Israel as well, certainly given the comments about not striking Iran's nuclear facilities. So one imagines the sides are hashing this out while realizing that the more time passes between the provocation for this retaliation taking place, perhaps the less credibility it would have in terms of re-establishing deterrence vis-à-vis Iran. It's also misremembering that Israel is in the middle of a 3-day Jewish holiday, a time at which the civil service shuts down and the government doesn't really make public comments. So it could also be that there is really a degree of public closure while the Israelis discuss it, and it's simply not being shared beyond the small discussion rooms at the very highest levels of government. Donna, happening at the same time is what is playing out in Lebanon, and we saw more escalating violence happened on Thursday. I mean, what more can you tell us about the situation there on the ground? So in South Lebanon, we have been seeing what Hezbollah are saying. There are clashes between Israeli troops there and Hezbollah fighters, and this is going, as we've seen, it's going to be difficult for Israel to push ahead with this, more difficult than perhaps Gaza, because, with Hezbollah, this is the bread and butter of these groups. It is to fight this guerrilla warfare. It is to fight asymmetrical warfare in those southern Lebanon terrains. And we saw yesterday the Israeli army asking more people in more villages to evacuate, kind of widening that area where that has to be empty. And of course, last night we saw local media saying 10 very heavy strikes hit the Beirut's southern suburbs. That's, of course, where Hezbollah enjoys strong presence. And usually when the strikes are that heavy, we suspect there is an attack or targeting at least of some high-ranking Hezbollah commanders there. There are rumors that are going on about targeting. The head of the Executive Council has himself suffered. Udin, who is the likely successor of Hassan Nasrallah, who was killed last week. And, of course, in Lebanon, on the ground, this is turning into a catastrophe. Right? 1.2 million people have been displaced. Damage is very heavy in areas in South Lebanon, in the Beirut southern suburbs and, of course, in the Bekaa Valley. And that's pushing people away from these areas and really a burden on a government who really has little to offer there. They're relying on aid organizations. They've asked for about $400 million to help with any support for these communities that have been evacuated. So we're looking at more devastation as this doesn't seem to be abating anytime soon. And Dan, just finally, you and Donna have laid out really a lot of the different factors that could potentially determine what happens next in the Middle East. What do you think will be key, though, in the next few days to pay close attention to? Well, I think Israel's made very clear its war goals, and I think almost a year into this war, the Israelis and the Israeli public will not want to hold fire until they see tangible achievements. Now, that means in Lebanon, for example, a capitulation of some kind by Hezbollah, be it declared, be it de facto, as done in noted southern Lebanon, is tactically very tricky for the Israelis. Unlike Gaza when they went in on the ground some 11 months ago, the topography there is difficult. It's densely forested. It's been heavily in place by Hezbollah. And the Israelis have already taken losses in the first hours and 2 days of this ground push. So the real question is which side